So if we can believe all the people who have ever woken up, we have to understand that we are pure beingness. And if this is true, and it is true, nothing you think has any relevance. Nothing you think can help you. Nothing you think can change what you are. The only thing that thinking does is keeps you in suffering, worrying about this, wanting to do that, getting attached to this and thinking about the fear of losing it. All here. None of it, none of what you think is going to help if you're into higher consciousness. Not one thing, nothing, not at all. There is no chance it can help you. Because what we are, who we are, has nothing to do with what we think. Ever. It's amazing that we have a mind that can perceive and can aid us in the material world, but living in the head, living in thoughts, constantly concerned about this and that, suffering it's not required. I haven't lived in my head for 18 years or more. We don't need to live there. And as a result, there hasn't been any suffering. Because if you don't live in your head, you don't suffer. What is there to suffer about? If you haven't got a story, what is there to suffer? What is there to cause suffering? There may be pain from time to time, physical pain, whatever. But if you're not thinking about some story about it, well, there's no suffering in it. It's just what is. It's just another sensation. Our love affair with the mind, if we really examine it, is a love affair with suffering, because it creates suffering. It's never content. It's always wanting more or less of something. It gets attached to anything that it thinks it owns, and then gets frightened that it's going to lose it. And we don't have to live here. We don't have to live in our heads. If you can keep away from the story of you, your life will improve immeasurably, immediately. The story of you is a story of suffering. I gave up the story of me probably around about 25 years ago now, when I realised that you don't need to have it. You don't need to indulge in the story of you to actually have a nice life. As a matter of fact, you have a way better life if you don't have a story of you. But that's up to you. When you give up the story of you, you've given up self-obsession. You've given up selfishness as well. You're still here, but you don't have a story of you. You don't have the suffering one here. There is nothing that this can do to raise your consciousness levels. There's nothing this can do to really help you if you're interested in enlightenment. Not a thing, except get out of the way. And it's up to you. So you might like to go away and think about that now. There's another craziness. Let's actually think about spirituality. Some people think collecting knowledge on spirituality is spirituality. Spirituality, or higher consciousness as I prefer to see it, is actually not living here, but living out of here. But that's up to you too. Some people like living in their heads, mainly because they don't realise that they're living in a suffering machine. But if you have enough detachment from your mind just for a little while, you can see that living in your head, in the story of you, your dramas, your life, your wants, your needs, your preferences, is actually suffering, and you're creating it and you're supporting it. And it's not a requirement for life. It's just an old habit that really could be better off gone. I discovered this idea of not having a story while working as a naturopath psychotherapist in Bedfordale. I noticed that every time I touched the door handle of my clinic, the story of Vishrant would disappear. The story of my life, my problems, my family would just disappear because I was there for whoever was on the other side of that door. I was in service to whoever that was, and my story would have been an interruption into what I was doing as an instrument for them. And I started to see, heck, while I was working, I didn't have problems. I didn't have suffering. It wasn't until I came out and got into my story, back into my life of Vishrant, that I started to find suffering. And so I decided, it must have been 25 or more years ago now, that I wasn't interested in the story of Vishrant anymore. And so as the Vishrant story arose, it was abandoned. And it was abandoned often enough till it didn't come back. Because after a while, it started to be abhorrent. Because it was always about problems. Because I'd been trained, like everyone else on this planet, to be a problem solver. That's how we got through school. That's how we got a certificate on the wall. By solving problems. Now, when I was a little boy, I'm sure that I didn't want to live the rest of my life as a problem solver, which is what most human beings do. So I gave up the story of Vishrant. And the story of Vishrant was about solving Vishrant's problems. It was over. It didn't mean I didn't operate in the world. I still operate in the world. I just wasn't interested in the entertaining story of Vishrant. I'd be more interested in your story. It's up to you. The more you indulge in your problematic, problem-solving mind, the more you are going to not be happy. Because apparently this talk tonight is on happiness. So first of all, I would talk about how not to be happy. Just live in your head. It'll do it for you. Guaranteed. Because you've been programmed to problem solve. To look for things that aren't working, dwell on them, try and solve them. And dwell on them some more. There's no joy in that. It's almost like it sucks the joy out of you doing that. And this is 12 years of schooling. Some people went for another 4 or 5 or 6 at university so they could learn how to do that a bit better. There's no value in it. There's no freedom in it. There's no freedom living in your head, in the drama of you. So, I dare you for a day, just a little bit of time, to drop the story of you and see if you really suffer during that day or not. I dare you to try it.